Alchemical Tech Revolution is sponsored by Litter Robot. Hi friends, I'm very blessed to have Litter Robot as a sponsor. If you're like me and you have cats, we have 3 of them actually, you know how busy life can be and how difficult it can be to follow up on cleaning the litter pan. So I highly recommend Litter Robot. We got our first Litter Robot a couple of years ago, and let me tell you, it's no fuss, no muss, no mess. All you have to do is empty the bag when it sends you a little notification in the app, and you just put the bag out in the garbage, and that's it. You tie it up, throw it out. There's no odor, nothing. Check out the product here at the link given in the video. You're listening to the Alchemical Tech Revolution, and I am your host, Wayne McRoy. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are around the world. Tonight, we're going to discuss Biodigital Convergence. You may or may not have heard this term before, but what exactly is it that governments of this world are planning for and looking forward to in the coming new age that we're seeing being snapped in place, the age of technocracy, if you would like to call it that? Well, we're going to explore that avenue of thought tonight. We're going to look at some official policy papers from various think tank groups, and one in particular that we're going to focus on here tonight is one from the Policy Horizons Canada group. Now, who are these people? Policy Horizons Canada is a strategic foresight organization within the Government of Canada with a mandate to help the government develop future-oriented policy and programs that are more robust and resilient in the face of disruptive change on the horizon. And of course, we're going to be reading a document titled Economic Futures Exploring Biodigital Convergence. What happens when biology and digital technology merge? And this was put forward in 2019, just prior to the rollout of the whole COVID scamdemic. Interesting, the timing on this, as everything else. So let's get right into it, because you might have a lot of questions about what exactly is biodigital convergence. What are they talking about? Talking about what happens when biology and digital technology merge. What does that encompass? Well, let's find out, shall we? And we'll begin here with the foreword, because there's a lot right in the foreword itself. And it says, in the coming years, biodigital technologies could be woven into our lives in the way that digital technologies are now. Biological and digital systems are converging and could change the way we work, live, and even evolve as a species. More than a technological change, this biodigital convergence may transform the way we understand ourselves and cause us to redefine what we consider human or natural. Biodigital convergence may profoundly impact our economy, our ecosystems, and our society. Being prepared to support it while managing its risks with care and sensitivity will shape the way we navigate social and ethical considerations, as well as guide policy and governance conversations. Gonna pause for a moment. Governance. There's a distinction between government and governance. Who implements governance strategies? Well, it's often these think tank groups and unelected officials outside of the auspices and reach of the electors in this country and others, of course. I'm referring to the United States, but this is a document from Canada. Same kind of thing going on there. You would think that your vote counts for something. Well, not when there's unelected officials put in charge of governance. And they are attempting to steer into place this push for this biodigital convergence. A step towards transhumanism, ladies and gentlemen. Let's continue with the document. Guided by its mandate, Policy Horizons Canada intends to start an informed and meaningful dialogue about plausible futures for biodigital convergence and the policy questions that may arise. In this initial paper, we define and explore biodigital convergence. why it is important to explore now, its characteristics, what new capabilities could arise from it, and some initial policy implications. We want to engage with a broad spectrum of partners and stakeholders. Gonna pause for a moment. There's another one of their favorite words in many of these think tank publications these days. You'll notice, aside from the word robust everywhere in these types of white papers, you will also find them referring to stakeholders instead of saying citizenry or the public or any such thing. They refer to you as stakeholders, and they seem to imply that you have some kind of say in this when you really don't. They speak for you, don't you know? But at any rate, that's another one of their favorite words. Let's repeat from there. We want to engage with a broad spectrum of partners and stakeholders on what our biodigital future might look like, how this convergence might affect sectors and industries, and how our relationships with technology, nature, and even life itself could evolve. We welcome your comments and participation and look forward to diving more deeply into the questions raised in this paper. And this is signed by the Director General of Policy Horizons Canada, Crystal van der Elst is her name. So, before we proceed any further with the paper, Biodigital Convergence, this is referring to a sector of biological research and technological research known as digital biology, which is a very real discipline within the sciences, and probably one you've likely not heard an awful lot about, unless, of course, you listen to broadcasts like this one, then maybe you've heard a little bit about it, but honestly, you don't hear much talk about it at all. Digital biology, and it could be one of the most important topics of the era in which we are living, because, of course, this is a prerequisite to the design and implementation of the transhumanist control grid, which they most certainly want to put in place. Of course, always tied to this notion of artificial intelligence as well. You see, there's something more to it than that. They want to have the human being vested fully in this type of way of thinking in order to bring about the changes in this world they would like. The technocratic control grid, in order for it to be implemented properly, has to somehow engineer the consent of the masses to do so. And how will they do this? By presenting you with these biodigital technologies that will make your life easier and better, and potentially make you live longer, make you smarter, make things more convenient and easy for you, for sure. But you'll pay for it, though. The next section is the summary, and it says, in the late 1970s and early 1980s, Canadians and policymakers began to understand that the digital age was upon us. Early movers seized opportunities, grappled with challenges, and initiated deft policies that had provided benefits for decades. We continue to see the powerful effects of digitization, and more are surely to come. But we may be on the cusp of another disruption of similar magnitude. Digital technologies and biological systems are beginning to combine and merge in ways that could be profoundly disruptive to our assumptions about society, the economy, and our bodies. We call this the biodigital convergence. I'm going to pause for a moment here, folks. This also has another name, which you may have heard in the past. This is also called singularity. Biodigital convergence. The singularity. This is exactly what's being spoken of here, the transhumanist singularity, biodigital convergence. These are synonymous terms in many regards. This is what governments of the world are working towards and planning for and looking at the implications thereof. They see the transhumanist singularity in the future, and they want to prepare for it by laying out governance strategies for the implications of this. And this is just one paper out of many that talks about this from the officialdom of government and quasi-government agencies. So let's continue on. This paper sets out an initial framing to guide Policy Horizons' upcoming foresight work. 3 ways biodigital convergence is emerging. Number 1, full physical integration of biological and digital entities. Number 2, co-evolution of biological and digital technologies. Number 3, conceptual convergence of biological and digital systems. I'm going to pause for a moment. So are you beginning to understand some of the implications here? They're talking about integration of biological and digital entities. What is a digital entity, ladies and gentlemen? We have to ask the question, don't we? Of course, most will say, well, they're just referring to artificial intelligence, of course. Is that so? Is artificial intelligence, can that really be considered an entity? How would you define entity? And of course, it's talking about co-evolution of biological and digital technologies. So this is putting a type of principle of life upon technology itself. It's giving the implication here of a type of life when it's talking about evolution of a technology. And they're talking in the former statement about integration of biological and digital entities. It's about combining the human being with the artificial intelligence. And who knows what that will spawn? That's the question here. So this convergence of biological and digital systems is what they are referring to here. What exactly will this reap? Let's continue reading and see what other ideas they want to discuss in this policy paper. Biodigital convergence is opening up strikingly new ways to, number 1, change human beings, our bodies, minds, and behaviors. Number 2, change or create other organisms. Gonna pause for a moment. Create other organisms. This doesn't sound at all like anything that we've referenced before within the occult fraternities about being God or becoming God, the apotheosis of mankind. The great work, according to many who follow that path in the occult, they want to be God. They want to be the gods of this place in no uncertain terms. So, of course, that has to do with changing human beings' bodies, minds, and behaviors. And, of course, creating new organisms or changing existing ones. Aren't we kind of doing that kind of thing now with genetically modified organisms? And, of course, you could argue the human being has already become one of these genetically modified organisms in many instances. What else does it say here? Number 3, altering ecosystems. Number 4, to sense, store, process, and transmit information. Next, to manage biological innovation. And finally, to structure and manage production and supply chains. So biodigital convergence is at the heart and soul of all of these different things. It's about fundamentally changing everything about this world. As I've told you in the past, it's all about transforming or transmuting this natural world into a wholly synthetic, artificial knockoff. Every bit of it. Not just the human being, not just the creatures therein, the actual world itself. They want to transform nature into something synthetic. And I don't think it's going to stand, but certainly, somehow, in their hubris, they think they could pull this off. But at any rate, let's look at the next portion here, which says that possible characteristics of the biodigital system include the following details: democratization, decentralization, geographic diffusion, scalability, customization, and reliance on data. I'm going to pause for a moment there. Reliance on data. That's why we are living in the age of big data, and that is why they depend on this data for everything, and why data is the most valuable commodity that there is. They have so many data points on each individual that it's ridiculous at this point. They know more about you than you know about yourself. And this is the key to what they want to pull off with this. Of course, they always disguise these ideas as, oh, it's decentralized, so therefore you have more freedom. Is that so? Decentralization doesn't necessarily mean freedom. And this is something that has been brought up with the emergence of cryptocurrency on the world. This is one of the main points that they try to push with it. One of the positive aspects to it is it's decentralized. Well, decentralization doesn't necessarily mean a lack of control by somebody or something. Let's put it that way. And of course, they also talk about customization, scalability, and geographic diffusion, meaning geography doesn't matter, where you are doesn't matter. You see, it's about building an entirely digital economy, a digital substructure of this world, and we're already well underway with this. With the invention of the internet and the adoption of the internet over the course of the past 20 years, it's become so central to daily life now that this generation of people, this young generation, could not imagine life without it. Let's put it that way. So we're becoming more reliant on this infrastructure, and that's what it's all about. Infrastructure, digital infrastructure, and of course, with the announcement of this vast Stargate project, they want to implement an AI infrastructure to control all of this. So next it talks about the initial policy relevant questions. And then it says of the economic questions, could traditional resource-based competitive advantages fade? Would education and training systems need to be adapted to address potential skill gaps? What could data protection and intellectual property frameworks look like in the biodigital era? And how can policy foster a competitive business environment in a biodigital world? Going to pause for a moment. So notice, they are focused exclusively on this notion of a biodigital era and a biodigital world, where all of these things will be neatly integrated one into another, all bound together. And how are they going to get there? Well, it starts with the transformation of the medical system. That's how you get biology wrapped in with the digital convergence that's coming. So they have to transform the entire medical system, and we've seen this in practice over the course of the last 5 years with the rollout of the COVID scamdemic. Now, whatever your opinion is on the nature of what they call COVID is irrelevant here. What you need to understand is this was the very tool they needed to use to implement this biodigital convergence plan, because how else can you attach biological systems to digital systems? Well, you need to transform the medical system first and then build all the other components into that. And of course, it's about digital ID. It's about biometric ID. It's about genetic ID. It's about all of these different factors, all centralized in one basic utility. And of course, they'll call this centralized utility decentralized, but it'll all be attached to the same place. It'll all be one vast system network regulated by artificial intelligence that will contain all of your data, all of it, every single item on you in this database. And it will be attached to you, probably physically as well as just in a figurative way. And with this comes, of course, Not only all of your genetic data, your medical data, everything attached here, but your financial data will be attached to that as well. Your bank account, your credit cards, your credit score, all of it, all in this centralized utility. And on top of all that will be your social credit score, of which the infrastructure is already in place here in the West. They just haven't fully implemented it or rolled it out yet. That's right, they have a social credit score on you already. You don't know it, and they haven't implemented it yet, but it's there, it's present. It's already going on quietly in the background. You can look into things like reputation scores, if you wanted to Google that, and see where the rabbit hole takes you. It's all there. Just hasn't been implemented yet in a centralized fashion, but of course, they're going to wait until they have this digital ledger system in place where they could centralize all of this and call it a decentralized database and have everything attached there. And of course, along with all of this will come the implementation of what they would like to call universal basic income. And that'll be the cherry on top to get everybody to agree to this system, to buy into this system. This will be how they manufacture your consent. Yeah, you give us all your data. By the way, we already have it all anyway, so it's not going to hurt you to just go ahead and consent to this, and we'll give you X amount of dollars per month so that you could buy necessities. And of course, this will be a type of programmable digital currency with an expiration date and with limitations on what you could use it for. For instance, you could use it to buy food or to pay your rent, etc., etc. And if you don't use it by a certain date, you lose it, so that you can't have any savings. All of this stuff has been think tanked out for a long time. It's all been war gamed out and strategized by this controlling elite that want to institute this technocracy on the people. It's a control mechanism, the ultimate control mechanism. But in order for them to get there, they need you biologically locked into this system so that you could be fully controllable from cradle to grave. That's why they're stepping outside the bounds of the regular legal fiction as we have it right now. Right now, we are represented by a legal fiction. This would be represented by your name on your driver's license in all capital letters. This is a legal fiction. This is a straw man identity by which they control you. It's a dead entity. We are living in the reign of dead matter, as Michael Hoffman calls it. The dead entity, corporations, same root word, corpse, corporation, a dead entity. That is a type of corporate identification for you. Your legal fiction. Your straw man identity. They've been slowly implementing these ideas into society over the course of time so that it's an easy transition for us once they get us biologically locked into that system. Because we're so used to some of these ideas already in our modern culture and how things operate. You know you need your social security number to do just about anything, right? If you want to take out a loan, you're going to need that. You're going to need some form of identification. And you're going to need to know your social security number so that they could check your credit score and everything else. We're so used to these ideas that it won't be a bridge too far for most people to just say, sure, I'll take that universal basic income from you. Because we pay our taxes and stuff anyway, so why shouldn't I benefit from that? Why shouldn't I have a little bit of security? And they have our data already anyway, and that'll be the attitude of most people. And that's how they get their foot in the door. And I suspect there's more in store for us. How exactly are they going to implement the attachment of the physical, biological person to this system? We're going to pause for a brief moment here. The Alchemical Tech Revolution is sponsored by Books A Million. We cover a lot of books on this program. So if you're looking for some place to purchase many of these books that we read from, You can check out Books A Million at the link given in the video below. Well, let's read on with this paper. So far, we only touched on what they call the economic policy relevant questions right there. So next they have the social questions. Could social attitudes shift towards health and lifestyle? They want to make America healthy again, don't they? You have to ask these things. Remember, this is a Canadian think tank paper, but I assure you there are U.S. papers, there are British papers, there are Australian papers. All of these first world countries all have a strategy that is very similar. They're in lockstep with this stuff. In fact, it's probably the same advisors on many of these panels. That's how governance works. It's think tank groups that make policies, not actual government agencies, even though that's supposed to be the case. They just adopt the strategy as handed to them by the think tank organization, and they implement them that way. So who's really controlling things? It's not your elected officials, ladies and gentlemen. They're just the figureheads. They're just the ones there to be the willing scapegoats for all of this. But let's go ahead and continue. The next question it asks about the social considerations are, what policies could help address health inequality? That's an interesting question as well, isn't it? What policies could foster trust among partners and stakeholders? And why are there partners and stakeholders? Well, there's a difference in the language. Notice the language they use in many of these papers. It's very pointed for a reason, and it asks things for a reason, and there's no words that are put in here by accident. They're not designating a difference between partners and stakeholders here, but I assure you there's a difference. And many who read these papers would probably know what that is, but they like to call us all stakeholders now, rather than call us the public or the victims or the cattle or whatever other term you want to put in here, because that's essentially what it is. So when they're talking about stakeholders, that's you and I that have no say in what they do, because they decided what's best for us already. So the next portion here talks about the environmental considerations. What changes could occur in land use and the natural environment? Well, that is something that they need to consider, isn't it? How much land will be used for farming and such, and who will control that? And that's the only thing they ask as far as environmental goes. And I thought these people were all about green energy and saving the environment and global warming and all of that stuff. That stuff doesn't matter anymore. Don't you know Elon Musk is the guy that founded Tesla? So now the electric cars aren't so important, are they? Now that it's gone kind of in the opposite direction of what the leftist ideology would like. So they don't care about the environment anymore, as long as they could stick it to the richest man on earth, right? Not like it matters to him. But the next considerations they consider here are the geopolitical conditions. What policies are necessary to compete in a global biodigital world? What is needed to protect citizen security in the biodigital world? Now there's a pointed question. Biodigital security. What does that even mean? Well, they're going to protect your information, aren't they? Just how they protect it today, right? And of course, the last question here they ask about initial policy relevant questions is a question of governance. And notice, they like to use the term governance, because as I've pointed out before, there is a big difference between government and governance. And governance is the more important facet of it, because these are the people that really run the show. So the questions asked for the governance factor of this are, how can regulation and policy making take social concerns about biodigital advances into account? And is there a current tax framework suited for the biodigital world? Here we go. And now we're getting into the meat of the matter as to why they're trying to restructure the government and eliminate government departments and institute new ones. And I suspect that probably the current tax framework is not best suited for a biodigital world. But let's see, what is the last question they ask about governance strategy here? Do public finance systems need to be reassessed to be sustainable in the biodigital world? Now we're getting somewhere. Financial institutions. Well, see, it's all about creating a one-world digital currency. That's what it's always been about. It's the same old New World Order, like I always say. These age-old ideas, resurfacing again, they like to put new lipstick on a pig. It's always the same thing, but they'll call it something slightly different just to make it sound more modern and to make it sound more desirable. But that's the end of the opening considerations in this paper of what kind of questions they're going to talk about here. So let's get to the meat of the paper here. The first section, officially, of this paper, that was all just the introductory and preface of the paper. What is biodigital convergence? Biodigital convergence is the interactive combination, sometimes to the point of merging, of digital and biological technologies and systems. Policy Horizons is examining 3 ways in which this convergence is happening. Going to pause for a moment. Now notice, this was written in 2019. Notice how they are saying that this is happening, not will happen. Or how we suspect it will happen. It is happening right now, right then, and still today. So number 1, full physical integration of biological and digital entities. Digital technology can be embedded in organisms, and biological components can exist as parts of digital technologies. Gonna pause for a moment. Did you pick that up? Did you hear what was just said here? This is for all the naysayers out there who seem to think things like nanotechnology don't exist. They most certainly do. These are known commodities, and these things can be implemented and used covertly, and they've discussed many ways of doing so in white papers just like this one. And I've covered some of these time and time again. But let's repeat that and then we'll continue on. Digital technology can be embedded in organisms, and biological components can exist as parts of digital technologies. The physical meshing, manipulating, and merging of the biological and digital are creating new hybrid forms of life and technology, each functioning in the tangible world, often with heightened capabilities. Gonna pause for a moment here. Remember, this was in 2019, just prior to the onset of the hugely transformative COVID scamdemic. What were they telling us? Let's continue. Robots with biological brains and biological bodies with digital brains already exist, as do human-computer and brain-machine interfaces. Gonna pause for a moment again. Did you know that? Did you know that robots with biological brains and that biological bodies with digital brains already exist as of 2019? This is not the stuff of science fiction. They actually have sources cited for that too, which we may or may not get to in this broadcast. But think about the implications here. A biological body with a digital brain already exists. Isn't that interesting? And has existed since at least 2019 at the writing of this paper. What are they telling us here? What do we really know about the modern state of science and technology? And of course, they're saying computer-brain interfaces also exist. This we know. We've been looking at these. In the public, in the mainstream, they've been talking about these. And of course, the big poster boy for this is Elon Musk right now, with his Neuralink. This has been going on for a very long time already. And it is advanced beyond what they tell you in the public domain. Let's read on. The medical use of digital devices in humans, as well as digitally manipulated insects, such as drone dragonflies and surveillance locusts, are examples of digital technology being combined with biological entities. By tapping into the nervous system and manipulating neurons, tech can be added to an organism to alter its function and purpose. New human bodies and new senses of identity could arise as the convergence continues. Gonna pause for a moment. New senses of identities. Is there a technological or a digital aspect to all of the identity confusion that is going on in the world today? Very real possibility. Let's read on. Number 2, co-evolution of biological and digital technologies. This type of biodigital convergence emerges when advances in one domain generate major advances in the other. The co-evolution of biological and digital sciences and technologies enables progress in each domain that would be impossible otherwise. This could lead to biological and digital technologies that are developed as integrated or complementary systems. Complex living systems, for example, bacteria, fungi, plants, and animal life, including humans, are increasingly subject to examination and understanding by digital tools and applications such as machine learning, also known as artificial intelligence. This deeper understanding enabled by digital technologies means that biology is subject to influence and manipulation that was not possible a few years ago. For example, pay close attention here, ladies and gentlemen. For example, gene sequencing combined with artificial intelligence leads to understanding genetic expression, which is then used to alter existing organisms to create organic compounds in new ways, or even entirely synthetic organisms. The CRISPR-Cas9 approach and other new gene editing techniques would have been impossible without the evolution of digital technology and bioinformatics. Gonna pause for a moment. What is bioinformatics? Well, this informatics is another word for cybernetics, just so you know. Biological cybernetics. Advances in digital technologies have helped the advancement of the biodigital. We also see a greater understanding of biology, which is fueling progress in the field of biological computing. Neural nets, computer systems that are designed based on biological brains, are an example of how biological understanding is shaping digital technology. There is also a blurring between what is considered natural or organic and what is digital, engineered, or synthetic. Gonna pause for a moment here, folks. And this is where the rubber meets the road with all of it. They purposely want to blur the lines of what is normal and natural and what is not normal or natural, or in their words, synthetic, engineered, digital, artificial. Are you beginning to pick up what I'm putting down here? We see the bounds, the borders, of certain known commodities, the lines being blurred on purpose. Things like gender. They've purposely blurred the lines of gender. Well, this is not a natural phenomenon. This is an engineered phenomenon, a digital or synthetic phenomenon. Yes, there may have been a small portion in the natural world of some types of these things, but largely what we're seeing today is the engineered version of this coming into play, and you could see all the ways it's been engineered through the manipulation of the mass psyche, through entertainment programming, and through various other things, usually implementing digital technologies. So understand where some of this is coming from. Let's read on. It says here, for example, biosynthetic vanilla is created using ferulic acid, eugenol, and glucose as substrates, and bacteria, fungi, and yeasts as microbial production hosts. Although it does not come from a vanilla plant under both U.S. and EU food legislation, its production from microbial transformations of natural precursors allows it to be labeled as a natural flavoring. Gonna pause for a moment. Now we're hitting on some things that might be a little closer to home right now. Natural flavor. When you see that on a product, a food product, that means it's engineered. Natural flavoring doesn't mean that it's derived from something natural exactly. It means it's engineered from natural components. Think about the implication there. A third form of biodigital convergence involves a shift in perspective that could reshape our framing and approach to biological and digital realms, facilitating the blending of the two. Gonna pause for a moment. Augmented reality and, of course, virtual reality, and man being struck with these new implementations of such a thing. This is part of this biodigital convergence, and the infrastructure for this is being set up right now. Are you ready, player one? That is the question I have to ask, with that pun fully intended there, because that's certainly what they want to set up. Let's continue reading. As we continue to better understand and control the mechanisms that underlie biology, we could see a shift away from vitalism, the idea that living and non-living organisms are fundamentally different because they are thought to be governed by different principles. Gonna pause for a moment. What's a non-living organism? That is a total oxymoron of a statement, first of all. But see, they're trying to normalize the idea of a synthetic, engineered, man-made thing being alive somehow. That's the implication they would like to give here. So let's keep that in mind as we continue here. So they're talking about a difference between what they call vitalism and what they're talking about here, a shift away from that. So it says, instead, the idea of biology as having predictable and digitally manageable characteristics may become increasingly common as a result of living in a biodigital age. Any student of biology today will have grown up in a digital world and may consciously or subconsciously apply that frame of reference to bioinformatics and biology generally. From a digital perspective, we see a potential shift in the opposite direction. Computing began as a means of producing predictable, replicatable, and relatively simple outcomes. As digital technology became more complex and connected, the system began to mimic the characteristics of the biological world, leading to the notion of technological ecosystems. Biological models are also being used to develop digital tools such as AI based on neural nets. The next section asks the question, why explore biodigital convergence now? There are enough signals to give shape to potential biodigital futures. These signals suggest that biosciences and biotechnology may be at the cusp of a period of rapid expansion, possibly analogous to digital computing circa 1985. That year, Microsoft introduced Windows 1.0, Atari released the Atari ST home computer, and the first domain name, symbolics.com, was registered. Computing was entering the mass market, creating value across many more types of organizations and contexts than it had during the decades of giant mainframes. And I'm going to pause for a second there just to point out the importance of the very first domain name that was registered, symbolics.com. Interesting on an esoteric level, isn't it? But anyway, let's get back to the reading here. Biodigital Convergence is showing signs of a similar trajectory, moving away from the centralized models of pharmaceutical and industrial biotech toward widespread commercial and consumer use. These range from bioprinters that create organic tissue to synthetic biology machines that can be programmed to create entirely new organisms. For example, Printeria is an all-in-one bioengineering device that automates the process of printing genetic circuits in bacteria. It is intended to be as easy to use as a domestic desktop printer and is projected to cost $1,500. I'm going to pause for a moment here. So now they could bioengineer circuits on bacteria at a cost of $1,500. Interesting. Rapid progress in biological technologies has benefited from the low-cost, broad availability and increasing capabilities of digital processing, storage, and communication. However, the biological realm's own unique and special attributes are simultaneously influencing digital systems. New forms of biological capabilities are being built into digital networks, as well as AI applications and computation, making them more efficient and creating new opportunities. Biodigital convergence involves a rethinking of biology as proving both the raw materials and a mechanism for developing innovative processes to create new products, services, and ways of being. Today's rapid rate of change and innovation compels us to reassess our understanding and expectations about biological and digital systems. The convergence of these domains could cause systematic changes across sectors and have policy implications. Governments can expect to be called upon to help manage the risks and seize the opportunities that could arise. Gonna pause for a moment. The Alchemical Tech Revolution is sponsored by 80stees.com. Hi friends, if you're a Gen Xer like me, you've probably been looking for just the perfect shirt, referencing back to some pop culture event back in the 1980s and having a hard time doing so. Well, the good news is everything you could think of relating to 80s nostalgia is available now in a high-quality clothing line at 80stees.com. You can find all sorts of pop culture references from the 80s there, and it brings back a lot of fond memories for me. So check it out at the link in the video here below. They always have to seize the opportunity, don't they? Even if it's a crisis, they always will seize the opportunity. They can't let a good crisis go to waste, can they? And of course, you see how the potential idea here could have come from a manufactured or potential crisis in the biodigital domain, and they've implemented all kinds of strategies and changes across the board that have altered human behavior just as described. So the next portion of this document that we're going to cover asks the question, what new capabilities arise from biodigital convergence? And then it goes on to ask us, what new capabilities are opening up? What combinations of biological and digital technologies allow this? And what is possible today? And it talks about new ways to change human beings, our bodies, minds, and behaviors. And how do they do so? Well, here's a number of things given in the chart beneath this that talk about this. It says, firstly here, altering the human genome are core biological attributes and characteristics. Monitoring, altering, and manipulating human thoughts and behaviors. And then it says advances in gene sequencing and editing, such as CRISPR-Cas9. Machine learning helps scientists to predict which genes to target for editing. Neurotechnologies can read brain signals to monitor attention and manage fatigue. And digital apps can help enhance brain health. And then it gives a list of different links talking about many of these technological advances and developments. So what are some of the new capabilities that are opening up right now? New ways to monitor, manage, and influence bodily functions, as well as predict, diagnose, and treat disease. Gene sequencing entire samples helps us to understand complex environments such as the human microbiome. Digital devices can be worn or embedded in the body to treat and monitor functionality, and machine learning systems can predict mortality and treatment outcomes. They can also use these technologies to create new organs and enhance human functionality. They can use things like 3D printed tissue based on digital designs and production tools to create customized organs. And, of course, they mention biohacking with implanted digital devices to enhance bodily functions. So I'm going to pause for a moment here. So they're talking about some very clearly concerning things. I mean, think about this. These are near-term or right-now technologies that have been developed and can be used. So what are some new ways to change the human being, how he experiences and interacts with the world? Brain-machine interfaces can enable machines to be controlled through brain signals. And, of course, prosthetics that use machine learning algorithms can expand functionality and sensitivity. They could create new organs and enhance human functionality through the use, once again, of some of these very same things. Machine learning techniques for simulating protein folding and contributing to drug design. 3D printing of tissue to test therapeutics. Nanobots and nanomaterials can operate and precisely deliver drugs within living creatures. Machine learning can predict the outcome of clinical trials. And of course, they talk next about changing the type or amount of inputs that organisms need to grow. How can they do this? Through advances in gene sequencing and editing, such as through CRISPR-Cas9. And I'm going to pause for a moment. And if you're not familiar with CRISPR technology, this is, in essence, by definition, a type of mRNA technology. Are you beginning to connect the dots yet? This is something that was highly touted a decade or more ago, this whole advent of this CRISPR-Cas9 tool for gene editing. And, of course, they use Cas10 or Cas11 or some such thing now. They've advanced beyond just those simple tools that were available a decade to a decade and a half ago. And now they're very precise with the things they could do. They could use this CRISPR tool to cut out portions of a genome and insert new material or proteins in that genome, and they will replicate. You could fundamentally change the DNA of a creature in this way. Of course, they will deny that now with the mRNA vaccines that they've introduced. They will say, no, it doesn't change your DNA. Well, there's evidence that is mounting and showing up in peer-reviewed scientific journals that shows with no amount of uncertainty that it does indeed alter your DNA. It turns your body into a protein production factory, and it produces this unnatural protein in and of itself and disseminates it through the body, and we're seeing the harms coming about from such a thing. But they were talking about this in this 2019 paper, the use of CRISPR-Cas9 and similar technologies to do these things. So next, they talk about here, beyond just advances in gene sequencing and editing with CRISPR and other technologies to change the type of inputs or outputs the organisms need in order to grow, they begin to talk about something else a little different here. And that is the creation of entirely new organisms with tailored characteristics. This is called synthetic biology. And this is also one of those disciplines that goes right along with this discipline of digital biology, which we're talking about. Synthetic biology draws inspiration from biology, engineering, computer science, and physics for the design and construction of new biological entities. Artificial intelligence can help design microorganisms with specific characteristics. Now, if you don't find any of this stuff hugely concerning, I think you're just not paying attention. Look at the things that have happened over the course of the past several years, and understand that many of these tools were available and are available still today to anybody who has a little bit of influence in the biomedical community and wants to institute certain technologies under the guise of a prophylactic of some sort. And they can put this to market and test some of these devices, these technologies, on people without them realizing it. Think about the implications of that. And if you want to say that that could never happen, you've not been paying attention. Let's put it that way. So they talk about new ways to change or create other organisms. Some more in this paper here. And they say, changing what and how organisms produce substances. Pay close attention. Advances in gene sequencing and editing, such as CRISPR-Cas9, can be tools to do this, or mRNA technologies. They can change what and how organisms produce substances. And this is certainly what we've seen done. These mRNA COVID vaccines that were introduced to the world, they cause the body to begin to produce this sequence, this protein sequence, this spike protein, which does not naturally occur in the human being. They've actually done this and rolled it out en masse. This is not theoretical. This is not being an alarmist. This is fact. This has been done. And now we're seeing some of the implications of what's come about. So they talk about ways in which, using these types of technologies, that they can alter entire ecosystems. And how do they do that? By changing and eradicating entire species. Germline editing using approaches such as CRISPR and gene drives that create new ways to alter ecosystems or wildlife. Going to pause for a moment. I mentioned the technology of gene drives in my very first book that I published, The Alchemical Tech Revolution. And this technology most certainly has been in use for a number of years now. They do these, they will genetically engineer entire species with gene drives so that when they reproduce, the new genetic information gets passed forward to the next generation and creates an unnatural creation or creature in this world. One that doesn't exist naturally, but has synthetic portions to its genetic material in it. Things such as malaria-resistant mosquitoes. Well, what else is going on with this technology? And of course, they talk about geoengineering approaches that can accurately model carbon and capture solar reflectance. So they go the next step here beyond just the biology. They're talking about the entire Earth now. Geoengineering. They actually talk about geoengineering in a Biodigital Convergence paper. Is that connecting dots yet? Geoengineering, this of course has to do with climate change, or the response to the alleged climate change that we're seeing in this world, and its justification for spraying the skies with these many chemicals. This is geoengineering, and this is solar reflectance, or carbon capture, as they're talking about it here. They're espousing the use of these programs to alter entire ecosystems and to therefore also change or eradicate entire species. Well, what species are they trying to eradicate? Let's put it that way. Let's ask the question bluntly. What do you think they're up to? Do you think this is a coincidence? Do you think there's no such thing as chemtrail spraying, as it's become known popularly in the conspiracy community? If you think there's nothing to it, you're deceiving yourself. It has everything to do with this biodigital convergence as referenced in this paper on biodigital convergence. It's talking about geoengineering in a paper on biodigital convergence. So anybody out there who thinks this is not an all-encompassing type of a strategy being used to bring about these changes and this transhumanist singularity in this world, you're just not paying attention. This is an official Canadian government document. And there are many, many more like this from around the world, from governments around the world. This is not a one-and-done standalone paper. There's many more that talk about all of these very same things, and we've seen how things have been implemented in this world and are leading to this inevitable biodigital convergence that they're talking about, also known as the transhumanist singularity. Are you ready, player one? I'll ask the question again, because this is certainly the world they want to build. They also talk about the epidemiology portion of this. Remember, this was published prior to the rollout of the COVID scamdemic. Predicting and managing the spread of organisms. Digital epidemiology relies on digital communication technologies and analytics to track diseases. Do you remember contact tracing? Well, that's what all of this is about. The next portion here asks about new ways to sense, store, process, and transmit information. New ways to store information using biological systems. Storing large amounts of digital information in biological systems for longer periods than current technology. How can they do this? By turning organisms into biocomputers. Using biological organisms and attributes to perform computation. Creating biomimetic materials, drawing inspiration from biological systems to design more efficient electronic and digital systems. More efficient and scalable research and production approaches by using digital systems to scale up biological production, using digital systems to automate research. So all of this is about this push for artificial intelligence. Because you see, they want to be able to make more accurate models of biological materials so they can manipulate them better. Let's be blunt. And this next portion talks about new ways to manage biological innovation, production, and supply chains. Increasingly open and efficient supply chain management due to machine learning and distributed ledgers that can track materials and aid in auditing. An open collaboration on cell lines and genomes to support research. Here we go. An open collaboration. This is your decentralized utility. It will be an open collaboration that scientists around the world will be able to access simply for the purposes of research. Do you think that can't be abused? I certainly would say it can. And how do they want to perform this open collaboration on cell lines and genomes? Through a digital network to assist in the efficient exchange of biological materials and code. Intriguing, isn't it? Intriguing. So, of course, this tells you all the things that we've seen coming for years now, and some of us have been out there blowing the whistle about this. It's all documented very well in the open literature in these government programs. So what are some possible characteristics of the biodigital system? What kind of things do they expect from this? Well, they expect unprecedented amounts of data to be produced in order to institute changes to the biological systems in this world, to make them more compatible with the digital systems in this world. Beginning to sound a lot like transhumanism, isn't it? It really is. So the dynamics of the biodigital world described above, using these terms in this paper to describe it, are democratization, decentralization, geographic diffusion, scalability, customization, and data reliance. And this requires individuals, governments, organizations, and industries to change the way they operate. So what is their mission here? They're exploring the potential implications of the biodigital convergence in an upcoming in-depth foresight study. You see, this paper is only a very surface-level type paper. But they claim that they're doing deeper research into the ways in which this biodigital convergence will affect the world as we know it. And they have a little section here that talks about some of the implications here. And they titled this, "The Future Ain't What It Used to Be." And we're going to read this portion of the document to try to give you some indication as to what kinds of things they expect to happen as a result of this biodigital convergence. The biodigital could unfold in numerous ways, and a future where it is part of human existence could be quite different. The following narratives, although hypothetical, describe scenarios that could emerge as biological and digital systems converge. I'm going to pause for a moment here. This is one of their favorite tools that they use in these policy implementation papers, is to do a hypothetical narrative. And they usually provide several different options and several different possibilities. This is one of the favorite tools that these think tank groups like to use. Gives them an exercise in knowing what some of the outcomes could potentially be and knowing how to pivot properly. That's another preferred term in these types of white papers. So the first thing they talk about here is radical life extension. Following a decade of simulating human biochemistry using machine learning, an Asia-based company becomes the first to develop and patent a radical life extension therapy. Based on altering the human genome in cells throughout the body, the therapy dramatically slows cellular deterioration, adding up to 15 years of healthy life to users, but effective only for people under the age of 40. The treatment is marketed worldwide at $10 million per course. More than 5,000 patients register for treatment within the first month of the announcement, including a reported 120 Canadians, inspired by Barclay's Beyond 100 report on longevity. I'm going to pause for a moment. So remember, these are possible scenarios that they give, narratives, stories that they tell, hypotheticals. But they seem to think all of these things are feasible and possible. So now they're talking about life extension. Could extend your lifespan by 15 healthy years, but only if you're under the age of 40. Well, something doesn't sound quite right there, does it? And they're talking about editing the human genome and cells throughout the body. What are they doing with these mRNA vaccines? If this was one of the calculated risks they were taking with this, I think it's been a failure, since we're seeing more mortality for the younger crowd with these things than has ever been present before. But I digress on that point. This is only one scenario they give as a possible outcome. The next scenario they talk about is food customized to your unique digestive system. One of the fastest growing companies in the food sector uses microbiome analysis to create personalized and dynamic nutrition plans. By designing food precisely for your body and the trillions of non-human organisms that make up part of your microbiome, My Best Biome company promises that you will have more energy and will feel better. Furthermore, 90% of the animal protein is sustainably sourced from specially engineered insects. The catch? You have to grant the company access and data rights to your entire biome to receive the product and its purported health benefits. Inspired by Food Designed to Feed the Human Gut Microbiota, a paper that was written and has been cited here. So this is another potential outcome that they predicted clear back in 2019 before the rollout of the COVID scam on the world. They were talking about you will eat the bugs, even in this paper. They said 90% of the animal protein is sustainably sourced from specially engineered insects. Are you beginning to understand how long the planning of some of this has gone on? Now remember, this stuff dates way back before this paper, too. But this was just a think tank policy implementation paper that was presented to the Canadian government as a response to this coming biodigital convergence. And these are some of the scenarios they envisioned. And many of these have been unleashed on the public right now. They're trying to normalize some of these concepts for us. The next one talks about a neurotech nightmare. Interesting that they will use the term neurotech nightmare and see this as a possible scenario. Sounds kind of dark. Let's read what it says. It says a leading Canadian supermarket is having a bad year. It's been embroiled in a scandal over several features of its loyalty program. The Your Choice program offers special discounts and preemptive ordering if you allow it full access to your digital twin, essentially giving it full access to your life and activity. A leaked internal report suggests that this data is being used in conjunction with intrusive neurotechnologies to encourage members to consume more. At the center of the scandal is the fact that the supermarket is essentially selling access to the minds of Your Choice members, outsourcing targeted consumer manipulation on a massive scale. And this is inspired by a paper called Towards New Human Rights in the Age of Neuroscience and Neurotechnology. And why would they explore this? As part of this biodigital convergence, if it's going to be such a positive thing, and I would suggest this is already going on, this neurotech nightmare one. They don't necessarily even need complete access to your quote-unquote digital twin or your mind in order to gather enough data points on you to know how to market things to you. They already do that. This is not a stretch too far. This is not a bridge too far. This is already going on. But this is all part of it as well. So you have to wonder, what is at the heart of all of this? And they explore all of these ideas in this paper and in other papers as well, and we've outlined some of it here. And you could look up this paper yourself. You could find it as a free PDF download online if you're interested in reading the whole thing. And I assure you there are dozens upon dozens of other white papers just like this from various think tank groups, from governments around the world, talking about this stuff. But let's see, what is the conclusion that this Policy Horizons Committee came to here? Conclusion. We could be on the cusp of a long-term biodigital transformation of our economy, society, institutions, and environment. This biodigital convergence could disrupt the way we produce and consume goods and services, relate to one another, maintain and augment our bodies, acquire and process data, make decisions, and manage our place in ecosystems. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Canadians and policymakers began to understand that the digital age was upon them. Early movers seized opportunities, perceived challenges, and initiated deft policies that have provided benefits for decades. Now could be the time to make similar investments and make thoughtful decisions to guide Canada through the beginning of a biodigital convergence. Policy Horizons looks forward to collaborating with partners and stakeholders to develop policy-relevant foresight in this area. So essentially, this paper only discusses some very basic tenets of ideas and doesn't really give an adequate answer to what their response will be, but considers possibilities as being feasible and realistic, some of them not so good, and compares it to the digital age that was unleashed upon us beginning in the late 70s and early 1980s, and how they were able to develop and understand the benefits of the perceived challenges of the opportunities present in that new digital age in which we were heading. And now we're heading into a bio-digital age where all of these advances that were made in the digital age are going to be implemented in a way that affects human biology, and not just human biology, biology across the board, ecosystems, everything. The whole world is going to be transformed in a very real way as a result of this biodigital convergence that's coming. This transhumanist singularity, if you would prefer to call it that. They've envisioned it, they've talked about it, they've expressed concerns about it, and they've created policies to implement changes in the direction that they would like for this to go. And it is always more about control than anything else from what we could see here. They don't seem to have any regard to the ethical questions. They don't seem to broach that topic all that much. They just want to make sure that they have some safety features in place to, quote-unquote, protect the rights of the stakeholders, and that's you and I. That's the public, that's the masses. And they all use this language in these white papers. It's very academic type of language. They like to use big words and terms. And there's certain terms that they like more than others that they use all the time across the board because they think it makes them sound smarter. And really, they don't make any real contributions about this to anything. We just went through this entire paper, and we have no clearer answers from where we began. We know the state of the technology. We know that there's a biodigital convergence that is on the horizon and that governments of the world are planning for it, but they haven't really given us any details as to how or what kinds of policies they will implement as a result here. They've only told you these are the possibilities that exist, these are the concerns we have, and the answers will be forthcoming in a later paper. And when you look for those later papers, they're very hard to find. But they are out there, and they do give you some more complete answers to some of the things they have planned. But it always looks a little more dystopian than utopian, although they try to disguise it as best they can. Let's put it that way. But like I was saying, in case you haven't been paying attention, there are big things on the horizon in this world, and they are pushing for this transhumanist singularity, also known as biodigital convergence, in the coming years. And we're beginning to see many of these things unrolling very quickly in the world around us. 2025, by the end of the year, this year, will be a highly transformative year. I think we're going to see some very big changes coming, probably in the fall, because that's the time frame that they like to leverage the most in order to bring some big changes about. So we'll see what happens with all of this. But if you've never heard the term biodigital convergence, now you have. And now you know it's just more of the new speak. For the transhumanist singularity, it's designed to push people further into this digital panopticon control grid that the technocrats of this world would very much like to build around us, the beast system that we have been warned about from the writings of olden times. And people still deny the accuracy of many of these prophetic things that have been put out in the religious literature as well as the philosophic literature. But we see it all coalescing into a very direct synthesis today, don't we? Which shows me that there is planning, human planning involved with this, but I think there's a spiritual direction that sometimes pushes things along as well. And we're approaching a time where there's going to be this separating of the wheat from the chaff. And we're approaching that rapidly. Are you going to advance spiritually, or are you going to get stuck in the soul trap that is the transhumanist singularity? These are questions we need to ask ourselves. Do we want to achieve what it means to reach our full potential as a human being, or do we want to go the other way, step into the world of shells, as described by the Hermeticists and the Kabbalists, and separate from all spiritual concerns, separate out the spirit from all of it, be devoid of spirit or life? It's the anti-life equation, if you want to call it that. Do we want to go that way? Do we want to be a wholly synthetic being, devoid of soul and life, and separated from God Almighty, the Creator, for eternity? Anyway, all of these things deserve consideration. I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. That's all the time we have for tonight. And I'll remind you, I appreciate each and every one of you. We'll catch you next time. Have a good one now. The Alchemical Tech Revolution is sponsored by Art of Play. Hi friends, if you have a curious mind like myself, you might be interested in checking out the things they have available at Art of Play. Not only do they have things like esoteric books that we speak on here all the time, and tarot card decks that we sometimes touch upon, they have all kinds of different amusements and curiosities, puzzles, games, the whole gamut of interesting things, curiosities if you will. So if you're looking for something like that, if you're trying to find a perfect gift for somebody that's a little outside the box, check out Art of Play at the link given in the video below.